trance, or as the raw material of nanam, or as conceivably distinct from the soul or ego. Lastly, in a more popular sense the term is used, notably in the Jatakas and in commentators' similes, for sign, mark, or token. Here, if we follow the sale to a means simply that sense perception which discerns, recognizes and gives class reference to, the impressions of sense. Its procedure is likened to the carpenter's recognition of certain woods by the mark he had made on each, to the treasurer's specifying certain articles of jewelry by the ticket on each, to the wild animal's discernment in the scarecrow of the work of man. The essence of sana is said to be recognition by way of a mark. In this notion of mark and marking lies such continuity of thought as may be claimed for the various uses of the term. The bare fact of consciousness means ability to discriminate, that is, to mark. To mark is to perceive. And the ideas or concepts of impermanence, impurity, and the like, were so many acts of marking, though of a highly representative character. Sana, no less than siddham, and thought, stands for both faculty and any act or product of that faculty. And it is even objectified so far as to signify further the result of any such act, that is, in its connotation of mark or sign. It is, I believe, when connoting the more specific sense of faculty, or of skandha, that it may safely be rendered by perception or marking, and may be taken to mean the relatively superficial, transient play of cognition when concerned with objects of sense. In ch. 14 of the Visuddhimagga, in a passage the late Henry C. Warren was good enough to transcribe for me, sana is in this way, and this way only, distinguished from atina nam and panna. The latter terms stand for cognition at a relatively higher and a still higher power, in virtue of the greater depth and complexity of the concepts they were exercised about. There is no more difficult problem in interpreting the Dhammasangan than to get at the grounds on which its compilers, and subsequently its commentator, saw fit to set out mutually independent descriptions of terms etymologically so identical as cetana and siddham. The only parallel that suggests itself to me is the distinction drawn, during a long period in British philosophy, between reasoning and reason, that is, between deductive inference and the nous, or noetic function. Both pairs of terms are quite popular in form. Compare, e.g. in the Nidana-katha, Buddha's reply to Mara. I have here no conscious witness. Let this earth, unconscious though it be witness. Sasatano kosi sakya, etc. Ayam asatanapai. Padhavi sakulti. Again, the import seems simple and quite untechnical. Their thoughts and hopes are fixed on lower things. Hence I have kept to terms popular in form. This does not justify the use of terms so undifferentiated as thinking and thought. Yet I have returned to them, after essaying half a dozen substitutes, for various reasons. They show the close connection between the Buddhist pair of terms, instead of obscuring it. They are equally popular and vague in form and extension. The import of cetana has much in common with the psychological account of thinking. No term misfits siddham less than thought, unless it be heart, on which see introduction. It is unfortunate that Buddhaghosa does not give a comparative analysis of the two, as he does in the case of Vaitakavikara and Piti Suksam. Under cetana he expatiates in forcible similes, describing it as a process of activity and toil, and as a coordinating, ordering function. He likens it to an energetic farmer, bustling about his 55 laborers. The 55 co-constituents in the thought complex. To get in the harvest. To a senior apprentice at the carpenter's, working himself and supervising the tasks of the others. To the leader of a warrior band, fighting and inciting. To these notions the definition of Nagasena only adds that of preparing, the other qualifying term being merely a denominative form. Insofar, then, as thinking connotes representative, coordinative intellection, it coincides with cetana. In its narrower, technical sense of intellection by way of general notions, it does not. Anyway, to call it thinking is sufficiently indefinite, and does not preclude the rendering of it elsewhere by such terms as reflecting, cogitating, considering, etc. But the problem has still to be solved of how it is related to such terms as saran as, see itarn, and vinanam. With regard to skandha, it is classed, not with siddham, but under the Sankhara skandha. Siddham, together with the terms in which it is described, is discussed in my introduction. Vitako and Vikaro is another pair of terms which it is hard to fit with any one pair of English words. It is very possible that academic teaching came to attach a more pregnant and specialized import to them than was conveyed in popular and purely ethical usage. Cf. M. I. Suttas 19. And XX. Where Vitaka would be adequately rendered by ideas, notions, or thoughts. In ASL. On the other hand, cf. Mil. The relation of the two to siddham and to each other is set out with much metaphor, if with too little psychological grasp. Vitako is distinctively mental procedure at the inception of a train of thought, the deliberate movement of voluntary attention. As a king ascends to his palace leaning on the arm of favorite or relative, so thought ascends to its object depending upon the conceptive act. Other metaphorical attributes are its impinging upon, circumimpinging upon, the object, and, again, bringing it near. Hence in selecting conception in preference to reasoning, by which Vitako has often been translated, I wished to bring out this grasping, constructive, reaching out act of the mind, this incipient fetch of the imagination, elaborated in the Buddhist scholastic analysis of the term. But I had no wish to read our own logical or psychological import of conception as intellection by way of general notions, or the like, into the Eastern tradition. Yet just as conception may be so used as to include reasoning or ratiocination, so Vitako is, in the reply, described by Tako, the term used for ratiocinative procedure, argument, or logic. What, asks the Sai, does one reason about? About a pot, a cart, the distance of anything. Well, Vitako is a stronger reasoning. On disposition, right intention, see. Apana Vyapana, the latter an intensive form of the former. In the Yogavakara's manual, apana denotes the dawn of the desired concept during the practice of regulated meditation. Buddhaghosa defines it thus. Ekagam siddham aram main apenti. Sitaso abhiniropena equals aram main siddham. Patithapiti. Vikaro, as compared with Vitako, was used to express the movement and maintenance of the voluntary thought continuum, as distinguished from the initiative grappling with the subject of reflection. Examining in detail, as compared with grasping the whole, is also read into it by commentators. It is a pounding up, as well as a linking together. Metaphors are multiplied, to show its relation to Vitako. It is as the reverberation of the beaten drum or bell is to the beating. As the planing movement of the bird's wings after the initial upsoaring. As the buzzing of the bee when it has alighted on the lotus. As the scouring of the dirty bowl when clutched. As the manipulating hand of the potter, Vitako being represented by the hand which holds the clay to the wheel, and so on. Investigation would well represent the sustained activity. Analysis, the cogitation in details. Discursive thought gives some of the import of both, without introducing modern and Western implications. Like the adjusting of bow and arrow. Focusing is anupekhamano. Pity. As distinguished from suksam, is explicitly excluded from the skandha of feeling, considered as the irreducible hedonic constituent, and referred to the composite psychoses of the Sankhara skandha. It connotes emotion, as distinct from bare feeling. That is to say, pity is a complex psychical phenomenon, implying a central psychophysical origin and a widely diffused somatic resonance. It arises out of a present idea, and suffuses the whole being. By Buddhaghosa's day it was divided into 5 species. The thrill of joy, just causing the flesh to creep. The flash of joy, like lightning. The flood of joy, like the breakers on a seashore. Ecstasy or transport, in which the subject could float in the air. An overwhelming suffusing joy. Instances are related of the fourth species, the inspiring idea being Buddharamanam karad. See also Visuddhi Magga, ch. 4. Yogavakara's Manual, 7. The same word is used to describe the anguish or trembling over guilt discovered. See below, n. Vidhi, meaning literally, as the Sai points out, prosperity, wealth, and used here by analogy as a state conditioned by a source of pleasure. Happiness arises to him who is joyful through his joy, as it arises to the wealthy through his rice possessions. Atamanata Siddhasa. Buddhaghosa, who did not know the true etymology of this term, is ready as ever with a guess. Atanomanata, or mentality of one's self, not of another, subjective experience. If I am pained or pleased, that is peculiarly my aft air. Psychologically it is interesting to note that he is prepared to find this intimate, subjective reference in a state of intense feeling. Feeling is subjective experience par excellence. Our feelings are all our own. Solely, the human mind, Robertson, Elements of Psychology. To contrast pity with sukhsam. Buddhaghosa draws a charming picture of the traveler who, foredone with journeying through a desert, hears with joy of a pool in a grove, and with joy comes upon it, and who, on drinking, bathing, and resting in the shade is filled with ease. Sukhsam, it is true, is not bare quiescence. It is positive, pleasurable feeling, and may have active concomitants. Its essence is expansion or increase. But just as dukhsam means, not so much pain as ill-being or misery, so does sukhsam mean well-being or sane and sound synesthesia. And as joy is the satisfaction of gaining what we desire, so is ease the enjoyment of the flavor of what we have gained. See further. Mental ease is perhaps more correctly soman asam, rendered by happiness, sukhm being sometimes distinguished as bodily only. C.S. V. Siddhakajita, the one-peaked condition of mind, is a name for concentration, says the Sai. And accordingly, whereas under it gives no further description of samadhi, it here applies to Siddhakajita the metaphors used in Mill. To illustrate samadhi, viz. The center part of a tent-shaped hut, and a chieftain leading his army. It then adds that this samadhi, which is called self-collectedness, has, as its characteristic mark, the absence of wandering, of distraction. As its essence, the binding together of the states of mind that arise with it, as water binds the lather of soap. And as its concomitants, calmness, or wisdom, for it is said, he who is at peace he understands, he sees things as they really are, and ease. The steadfastness of thought is likened to the steadiness of a lamp flame in a windless place. See Yogavakara's Manual, p. XXVI. These three cognate terms are in the text Siddhasatiti Santhiti Avathiti. According to the Sai, the standing unshaken in or on the object connoted by titi is modified by the prefix sam to imply kneading together the associated states in the object, and by the prefix ava to imply the being immersed in the object. The last metaphor is in Buddhist doctrine held applicable to 4 good and 3 bad states: faith, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. Craving, speculation, and ignorance, but most of all to self-collectedness. Avasaharo, avikhepovi. Distraction and loss of equilibrium are attributed to the presence of excitement and perplexity. Samatho. Distinguished as of 3 species. Mental calm. Legal pacification, or settlement. Calm in all the sanskaras, by which, according to the Sai, is meant the peace of nirvana. On faculty, see introduction. Faith is characterized and illustrated in the same terms and approximately the same similes as are used in Mill. pp. That is to say, it is shown to be a state of mind where the absence of perplexity sets free aspiration and energy. It is described as trust in the Buddha and his system. There is, however, no dwelling just here on any terminus ad quern, as St. Paul did in speaking of the prize for the mark of the high calling, etc., towards which he pressed in ardent faith. There is, rather, an insistence on that self-confidence born of conviction of the soundness of one's methods and efforts, which is, as it were, an aspect of faith as a vis a tergo. In the simile of the stream, the sigh differs from Trenckner's version of the Milinda to the extent of making the folk afraid to cross because of alligators and other monsters, till the hero takes his sword and plunges in. See the note on faith in the translation of Mill. E. In the Buddha, the doctrine, and the order. Buddhaghosa is only interested in making the etymology bear on ethics, and compares the downward plunge of confidence in the attitude of faith to the sinking in mindfulness, the grounded stand in concentration, and the sounding penetration of wisdom asl. The Psi puts forward an alternative explanation of the repetition in the description of this and following compounds of the first term of the compound, viz. Faith. According to the former, it is the method of Abhidarma to set out in isolation the adjectival part of a compound on